Hi guys, hi everyone. We have Batul here. She's a supply chain consultant from Jordan. So she is part of Health Logistics. Hi Batul, how are you doing today?
I'm fine. I'm great. Thank you, Ramesh, for having me.
Yeah, great, Batul. So I think it's gonna be a very short podcast. So Batul, to help, to help with health logistics and humanitarian supply chain and leadership, what was the moment that first made you think this is the work I meant to do?
I think that's a great question because I find people who are working for the humanitarian sector come with stories. I originally have worked for the commercial sector for a pretty long time. I worked for the fashion industry, I worked for the telecommunications industry, but I was always wondering if there was a world beyond collecting money.
Okay.
And so I started to volunteer for refugee camps in Greece. That's when
Mm-hmm.
the Syrian crisis was on. And I really wanted to see people on ground, trying to find food and clothes on a daily basis for their children, people who have been displaced. And I actually created a data system for one of the
Wow. Okay.
camps. And based on the data systems and my leadership skills in that specific camp, I was for working for volunteering for a Swedish nonprofit organization. The Swedish government actually granted me a full scholarship to continue my studies in sustainable development in Sweden. And after I did that, I quit my commercial job and really pretty much never looked back. I invested my time in consulting nonprofit organizations and sustainability projects across the world.
So how long you been doing this now?
For the nonprofit sector, I have been doing this for about 4 years since I did my master's degree. And I think what really is very helpful to have a commercial point of view when working for the humanitarian sector.
So what is the Batul, what is the specific crisis you witnessed? Maybe you got a mentor as well. What's the exact turning point, the pivotal point in your career? That's where you decided, okay, say let's go and be part of humanitarian supply chain.
I think I was working for the commercial supply chains, and I think there was just a continuous feeling of, is there anything more than working a day job and collecting money that's not even going into my pockets? Is there more to life? Is there more? Can I have a job where I can have an effect on people's lives, can make a difference? It's the same day job sometimes, but sometimes it's not, because in the humanitarian sector, I found a purpose. At the end of the day, we are trying to strengthen supply chains, provide food and medicine for people who are in need.
So it looks like you have witnessed a lot of inefficiencies in the particular domain. So what is the iceberg under the water in humanitarian supply chain that people don't see most of the time? So
And I think there are a few because of the limited support that the nonprofit sector gets, because there's no profits there. It's really driven by people who want to do good. And based on that, we see inefficiencies when it comes to process, technologies, and also capacity building. So, for example, for process, humanitarian supply chains, they work for emergencies all the time, right? There's a crisis somewhere and you need the supply chain to deliver food and aid. And then in the times of emergency, sometimes those supply chain, they up emergency based processes that sometimes just are inherited even when the crisis goes on. And so it
Mhm.
becomes inefficient, because even when the crisis is not there, they are working according to processes that may have worked in emergency but may not be very efficient without an emergency. So there's a lot of inherent processes confused between emergency through a crisis and after a crisis. Something else that we see every day when it comes to digitalization in humanitarian supply chains is the lack of data collection.
Mhm.
So there's not much data collection. Things are done very manually. I was talking to an organization the other day where they literally opened the a notebook, and they are literally registering the data. I couldn't believe believe my eyes. I mean, we're 2025, right? And Excel sheets is the minimum thing. But you still see that all the time. And it's really due to the capacity, the limited capacity and capability of nonprofit organizations in some area. However, even if we were going to look at the good side for organizations that do data collection, we really see poor data quality. So because there is a crisis, we don't really have the time to collect the data right now. We'll push out the aid, and then when we get the time after the crisis, we'll start putting in the data. This really limits the organization to do data analytics and really learn its behavior in crisis and its behavior after the crisis, and really creating a feedback loop of what did we learn from the responding to this crisis. So there's a lot of data also which really comes from the technology aspect, to learn from their behavior. I think there is the last point which I spoke about. It's capacity building. I mean, in nonprofit organizations, especially supply chains, we're pushing aid, we're working on crisis. There is an earthquake somewhere. We don't have time nor a budget to kind of train our people. And develop their capacity. And I think this is where us help logistics come for all three. So we do a lot of capacity building that is pro bono for nonprofit organizations to enhance their supply chains. We also invest in technologies to do the data collection, and we have experts conduct the data analytics for them to learn from their previous behavior. But I mean, for the organizations who are still opening a notebook and writing, I don't know what I'm going to say to that.
Okay, so quite interesting. So I think in the particular industry which you are operating, right, it's like there are some system of records in place where you guys are using certain tools which can be a custom built tool or ready-made tool or the commercial off-the-shelf solutions, or or the ready-made tools, the general tools like Excel and other stuff, and then the system of intelligence comes into picture. So how you guys manage data? It's all in the Excel sheet right now, or is anyone supporting the industry?
I think there are players that are supporting in the industry like we do. However, I think there is a huge demand for it, especially technology. Unfortunately for the nonprofit sector, because they are quite limited on resources and financial resources, all the money and budgets are going to aid. And it really leaves behind technology. However, technology is very important to enhance and strengthen the supply chains that deliver aid in the first place. So there's always a need for digital companies from the profit and non-profit sector to invest in technology for humanitarian supply chain. I mean, I can bring an example or two where we have invested in technologies as help logistic. Of course, I mean, when you want to tailor the technology, you want to assess the capability and capacity of the organization. What type of technologies do they have? How mature is their digital system? And I think that is definitely a space where we really need more actors to support the nonprofit organizations. We have actually at Help Logistics, we collaborated with more technology providers in the space, and we worked on one technology to enhance, to really provide organizations that are going to open healthcare supply chains in a new country. We actually adapted their data to the data of the MOH so they can understand what type of diseases, what type of medicines that are used, to kind of give them a kickstart rather than going into the country and starting blind. I think this was a very successful project where it really, what used to take an organization or a supply chain, humanitarian supply chain in the medical field, like 6 months to just understand its surrounding and the context, the medical context in that country, we actually just linked them with the MOH, and they could already get started and get the medical supplies and pharmaceutical supplies that were needed. And so we were able to set them to deliver faster solutions to the people in need on ground.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So in the entire supply chain process, there are a lot of people involved in it, right? Key decision makers, the people who come with certain metrics they need to track to take informed decisions.
Mm.
They might lack the data first of all to be collected, and then using this data, they have to decide what are the KPIs they can track, the key performance indicators from the data they need to track. So, what is the particular stakeholder in the entire, humanitarian supply chain process will get benefited from technology implementation on data analytics?
I think that's a great question. There's external stakeholders that will definitely benefit, and they are very key for humanitarian supply chains, such as the beneficiaries at the end of the day, right? It's
Mm,
how many people we can support, whether it's pharmaceutical aid or food aid or even
mm,
non-item food aid. So it's really how many people, how many beneficiaries, how many lives can we touch by
mm,
reading this data. And then another thing also for beneficiaries is how fast we can get there, right? Where is the need and how fast we can get it there. So data analytics and humanitarian supply chains will also show us our performance. How fast were we to respond in the last crisis or in the last incident? How much we can do better this time. And I think it's also, even when it comes to beneficiaries, it's very important for us to have data analytics to kind of reflect. Processes and data, it's really there to kind of show us how we can do better, how we did, and how we can do better. So at the end of the day, it's definitely to touch people's lives. However, there's definitely very strong, important internal stakeholders who will be
mhm.
reading into this data. So whether they are, they're definitely sweet C-level. So it's definitely whether it's the chief innovations officer or the chief's supply chain officer. But we really find by experience, CEOs really are starting now to read into supply chain analytics. And donors are really looking into measurements on efficiency of how fast and how efficient we were able to deliver, or the humanitarian supply chains were able to deliver aid. So donors are definitely beneficiaries at the end of the day, how much lives we touch upon, and obviously internally as internal stakeholders, they're quite high in the hierarchy these days, looking at the data analytics, because at the end of the day, it's their responsibility to deliver to beneficiaries and also report on donors.
So even the donors will be highly motivated when they look at certain data real time, right? To do more service.
Oh, by far. I mean, by
By
far,
far.
even like when you want to invest, you want to see how efficient the organization that you have invested in, it definitely attracts donors, real time tracking, digitalization to collect and quantify the data, and data analytics will definitely and do definitely these days attract donors. And it is a donor requirements in most of the times that we see.
So how do the donor like to get the information, right? It's a periodically, like weekly ones, monthly ones, how the reporting system works, will they be happy with real time data as well to take a decision?
Look, we really see real-time data for donors right now is becoming a trend for sure.
Mm,
I know we have been implementing a project for a humanitarian supply chain here in the Middle East, and
mhm.
they have a timely dashboard. So every second, how much did the supply chain deliver and where across the whole country. And donors, this is really acting donors and donations, because it gives them a lot of transparency and confidence as to where they're putting their money.
So it's quite interesting to know more about the humanitarian supply chain because it's quite very, very niche industry, right? And
Mhm.
how that is connected with data analytics. I think wherever wherever the data analytics used, generally in spite of the domain agnostic, I think the real value is added more during the crisis time and the emergency time. It's not just only about analytics, how quickly we are spreading the information and getting the people together, right? Building that the more resilience. So was there a moment where a piece of technology changed an outcome from the ground up level, in your career, where you witnessed, wow, technology can do a lot of magic to the industry?
I think in various times, I think the example that I gave on donors, real time tracking data for donors, I think this is a trend that we are really seeing. It's
Mm-hmm.
also attracting donors, and it's really giving them confidence as to where they are investing their money. But another thing is also beneficiaries. We're really saying that, for example, a system that is able to adapt the supply chain according to the Ministry of Health kind of requirements and numbers is able to get it already adapted to the country, although it's very new to the organization, but the system already adapted to the Ministry of Health requirements. It kind of gets them like fast delivery, especially in times of crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And also inventory control. I think for supply chain, it's very important to understand what inventory you have, and based on data analytics, can kind of model the demand that might be required, because at the end of the day, they are learning machines. They do read into the data, whether in this or the same type of crisis, but in different areas, and are able to support the decision makers. It becomes a more informed decision making process, and therefore knowing what inventory you have and what demand you need, you are able to kind of focus donations into exactly what you need to distribute for the beneficiaries.
So I think from my side, based on this interaction, I feel like there are two metrics is very important to the industry. One is leading metric and lagging metric. Analyzing the past data and predicting where it goes strong, where the efficiency can be improved to reduce the wastage of inventories as well.
Mhm.
Right. So what is the dream tech, Batul? Do you think you wish that would have been existed, but doesn't it exist in the world right now? What's your dream? If
I do have quite a few dreams, I must say. I think we see now nonprofit organizations that are quite growing. Like, for example, I can say food banks.
Mhm.
Food banks have been growing massively after 2000, and actually have been tripling in size after the COVID crisis. But really working for the food banking sector, I feel that business fit technology is really missing.
Mm,
They are spending years and years to adapt technologies out there, the best technologies out there to banking. However, it's really
mm,
not related to the sector. So we really see all the time years and years of investment to
mhm,
tailor, what's out there of technologies to a food banking sector, and yet it does not come very efficient, because at the
mm,
end of the day, it's not the purpose, right?
mm.
I think this is the main concept that really my I really wish this happens to humanitarian supply chains, and honestly, I really hope that we can do this together.
Definitely, why not? So anything is possible using technology. So even the Gen AI based software development life cycles, or we've been trained our resources in Gen AI based software development life cycle, so we can cut down the development and timeline and cost, up to minimum one third and maximum one fifth. So which means all this non-profit organizations can digitize their operation, supply chain, inventory, data analytics with a fraction of cost, than what it used to be. So Batul,
It's
when it comes.
impressive. Sorry, it's impressive, and I think it's really needed. The nonprofit sector, the people are there based a lot on passion and, of course, on expertise and skill. Digitalization is so important, yet it's really pushed back because all the money has to go into food and aid. So yeah, I mean, every cost cutting today matters. And I really think that it's not only for humanitarian supply chains, but even in the world.
Yeah, I think when we say right, when problem became opportunities, when right people joined together. So if you look at DigiRite, right, we have our CEO who is a doctor by background, turned as a tech consultant. So most of the time we are more empathetical, and we always wanted to work with the non-profit industry to identify and help them to build their system of records to collect the data first, wherever it lacks, and then build a system of intelligence, where we can help them to choose certain metrics and decision points and build a very beautiful, intelligence. So in modern days, you can collect all these data sets and you can query it qualitative basis as well, where you can just go and ask the question about how much food is wasted in this area. It's going to answer you with a beautiful dashboard. So the real time dynamic analysis is possible.
That's very impressive. I do have a question though. How
Okay.
can we ensure that the system is not a byproduct process, especially humanitarian supply chains when we're working or when the people are working in a crisis process and everything is out the window and it's really about getting the job done. But in my point of view, process and technology should be a key element to enhancing speed in crisis. My question is, how can we ensure that technology is not a byproduct process?
So it's a very good question, Batul, right? So I'll start with the industrial age, okay?